Greetings, mind crafters, and welcome to another exciting conversation here, another Minecraft conversation. My name is Kimberly Quinn. I'm your hostess with the mostest. And remember, we're all about becoming the boss of the brain. That is the whole plan. Taking control of our thoughts leads to getting a grip on our feelings and then our actions, which means that we are living our best lives. So today's chat is on reversing the internal negativity. We had a talk yesterday about reversing the external negativity. That we're going to take a look at kind of stopping that negative internal dialogue, and it's very important to realize that we are wired to think negatively. Even the most positive of us are wired to think negatively. Why? Because it's primal. Way back when we were ducking into caves, running away from saber-toothed tigers and raptors and pterodactyls swooping, dipping in to pick us up and with their talons and grab us and taking us away for their, midday snack. We had to kind of be in survival mode. So constantly contemplating what could happen next in a negative way was how we survived, way back then in prehistoric times. So once again, the amazing Jay Shetty is my inspiration for today, and he is the author of Think Like a Monk, Train Your Mind for Peace and Purpose Every Day. And he's definitely on my list of people to have lunch with. I'll tell you that right now. But he talks about the whole idea of decluttering our mind, which I'm all about that, and taking care of our brain attic. So the brain attic idea actually came from Maria Konnikova. She's the author of Mastermind, another great read. But keeping it decluttered. So by sifting through the external negativity, sort of monitoring how much, how many of our life minutes we spend with negative people, hopefully not many. And then there was definitely not many. Jay talked about that like 1 to 3 ratio for every one negative person. He did it a percentage, I think, right? So 25%, 70 is 25, 75. So, but basically, for every one negative Nelly, you want to surround yourself with 3 positive Pete's, so that there's more of a positive influence there. Because we do become who we hang around. There is no question with that. And so he says, the first step basically is becoming aware of it. So he says, sometimes we tend to deny the responsibility for negativity that we ourselves put out in the world, but negativity doesn't always come from other people and it isn't always spoken aloud. This is what I like too, because we tend to think, I was talking about people being secondhand smoke, and if like that's my analogy with people with the whiners and complainers, right? It's kind of like if you want to go ruin your own lungs, go ahead, but I don't want to breathe you. So, and I like how he says, though it's not always that obvious, it's not that overt like secondhand smoke. Sometimes the negativity is coming in the form of the other negative emotions, right? Like envy and resentment and guilt and anger and shame and things like that. And it's easier to blame those around us than it is, to kind of, as Jay says, purify our own thoughts, which will protect us from the influence of others. When we stay on our own game, we tend to focus on winning from within. Then it doesn't really matter what anybody else does around us, honestly. So Jay has his own method of how to do this, like from his monk experience, how to kind of monitor our own negative thinking, which he has called or referred to or labeled spot, stop, and swap. And I think the first part is what I would call awareness, because we've talked about this before. We cannot do what we do not know, right? And so then my dear friend Dr. Dave says once we become aware, we become responsible. So just like we don't want other people's negativity leaking into our day and our life minutes. We don't want anybody sticking a pin in our happy bubble. Well, that means we don't need to be, leaking any negativity into anybody else or sticking a pin in their happy bubble either. So it's very, very important for us to watch our words. And of course, I'm actually thinking of another influence right now, which is, or who is, Don Miguel Ruiz in his book, The Four Agreements, because he talks a lot about, it's one of the four agreements, which he talks a lot about, which is being impeccable with your word. And so imagine if we were more impeccable with our word, meaning what we say and saying what we mean, how much less negative we would be, because we would catch ourselves like, oh, I don't need to say that. Why am I even telling that story about how I stubbed my toe and got a run of my nylons all in 30 seconds? No one cares and it's over, right? It just brings, no one needs to have that information, that sort of thing. And so Jay says spotting, which is the first part, right? Becoming aware of negativity means to learn to spot the toxic impulses around you. So, and I actually, I forgot what I caught myself the other day. I caught myself. It was similar to that stubbing your toe, run your nylons thing. It was such a small level. It wasn't that because I rarely wear nylons, but it was something. And I'm like, why am I don't need to share this. It's stupid. It's over. It's dumb. I forget it was something on the way home or who knows? But like we sometimes we just sort of when we're on autopilot, right, which is the biggest thief of life minutes that there could possibly be, we just spew these little stories throughout the day that, oh, and I was in traffic and I had to wait 15 minutes. It took me 15 minutes to get home. The 15 minutes longer than usual to get home. Who cares? You're already here. You don't. Why are you sharing that? So that sort of thing is what we're talking about. Also, I think when we're aware, or when this, there's Jay says, spotting what we're talking about, we can also catch ourselves, if we're jumping on the gossip train, you know what I mean? Judging, being critical, because obviously when we criticize anyone, it says very little about the criticizee and it says a whole lot about us, right? That's about us not feeling whole and complete. So this spotting thing or becoming aware is really good because that can help us to take a deeper dive in the beginning of our day, or if it's in the middle of the day or whatever, to turn it around. Like, what was my need to say that? What's going on inside of me? Why am I feeling insecure in this minute? Why am I feeling jealous or envious or guilty in this minute? Why something stirred up some shame from my childhood? Where did that come from? Why did I give some snark back to that person? That wasn't even about them. It really, so when we stop and breathe, right? And maybe if you have to dip into a restroom or something just to figure it out, that's a good thing to do because if we want to figure out, what the source of that is, so that we can kind of redirect back toward, the loving and kind energy, right? And so after Jay had, I had awareness, Jay had spot, right? The next is stop, and that's when, once we put the brakes on, like, where did that come from? Why did I just regurgitate that unkind thought and or action there, or actually verbalized it to somebody? Why that must have come out of a place of insecurity that's buried deep in the vault. Like, once we get that, then we can really decide to kind of silence that negativity, and put it on hold until we figure out, like, what's going on with that, and then hopefully just, let it dissipate. And he says something about, remember that saying whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want, is not freedom. Real freedom is not feeling the need to say these things, right? So, and that comes down to, weighing out whether it's more important to be kind or right. And 99.9% of the time, it's more important to be kind than right. And that's that Shenpa thing again, that Sanskrit word where we get that urge. And again, it doesn't mean we're not right. We could be 100% right as far as we read a more current article. We're in a professional meeting and the person just said this and they're all proud of themselves and da 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 da. And we read an article, zero point 0.3 seconds ago that's more current. And we could have been a total showboat at this meeting. Boss would have loved it. Da 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 da. Do we need to, do we just got to evaluate? Is it worth making that person feel like crap because you have, like, 3 sentences of newer information? Or you can, kindly and politely after the meeting, not in front of the whole world, say, "Hey, did you check this article out?" And just, forward it to them. You know what I mean? Or there's all different kinds of examples of that, but also just refraining from verbalizing the defects in somebody else, right? Kind of goes back to that counting the teeth in somebody else's mouth thing. And I'm no expert on the Bible, but I know it says in there somewhere about, um, you know, the log in somebody else's eye and the splinter in our own. Maybe that's the reverse. I forget. But the whole point is not to take somebody else's inventory. That's what they say in the 12-step program. Because lest somebody take our inventory. I know I sure as heck don't want that. So when we kind of limit our negative speech, Jay says we may find that we have a lot less to say. Wow, that's like a sobering statement right there. Okay, so as far as reversing internal negativity, so far Jay has come up with spot, stop, and then the last one is swap. So once we've kind of become aware of something negative, whether it's we've overtly, said it, or we're swimming around in some negative emotions like guilt or resentment and shame or whatever. Once we kind of get it and we're trying to figure out the source, that's when we can kind of sort of swap it out for less intense language maybe, and to also really just validate ourselves and just say, okay, we might be feeling injured ourselves right now. However, we don't need to go and injure somebody else, right? What we can do is, learn to push the pause button, right? Push the pause button, which is our, Daniel Kahneman would label our system 2 thinking, like our Sherlock Holmes thinking, right? Because, and that's actually Maria Konnikova talks about Sherlock, but they're saying the same thing. Our more observant, slow down, gather the facts thinking. We can just slow it down and choose more precise words. And Jay talks about how monks are considered quiet, and he thinks because they are trained to choose their words so carefully that it takes some time. So imagine, it goes back to Don Miguel Ruiz too, with the be impeccable with your word. If we were even 20% more careful with what we said all day long, I mean, all of us, monks and non-monks alike, how much better the world would be. It would just be such a better place. Autopilot is dangerous. Not only does it steal life minutes, but it has us just saying all kinds of things that just aren't helpful and maybe even hurtful. So Jay says we choose words carefully and use them with purpose. So that impeccability with your word thing, right? So spot, stop, swap to reduce negative internal dialogue, and definitely be more impeccable with your word. That is what we're talking about right here, because if we can reduce our, remember, we're not looking for perfection. The P word is worse than the F-bomb, right? We're looking to be less negative, today than we were yesterday. If you start out not so good, I want to be less negative this afternoon, let's say after lunch, than I was before lunch. And that's really it. The eye is on the prize, which is about just improving, always moving forward. Progress, not perfection. Okay, so there you have it. Reversing internal negative dialogue. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from the beautiful, sunshiny Northern Vermont. Have a mindful, very positive day.